everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to another episode of Laughter Through Tears, the 120 podcast. And I am your host, Jackie Duda. I live in Central Maryland. I started this podcast after surviving septic shock, which, depending on when this airs, it might be very close to my 5th anniversary, my life day, so to speak, of the day I almost died of septic shock. 5 years ago on May 22nd, I was flown from Central Maryland to shock trauma in Baltimore. I was near death. And as I recovered and as I dove headfirst, might say, into patient advocacy, I wanted to start this podcast to give all people involved with sepsis, chronic conditions, and disability, to give rise to all of our voices, to give us a platform from which to speak. And also to inform and to make people aware of a lot of these conditions. Look, I have osteoporosis, and it is May, so it is Bone Health and Osteoporosis Awareness Month. It is also Ehlers-Danlos Awareness Month. I have that one too, so I'm just checking the boxes. I have Crohn's disease, POTS, you name it, I got it. And here I am to talk to all of you, and more importantly, to welcome a really fantastic guest. I just met her last year through my involvement with the Bone Health and Osteoporosis Foundation, and she is a wonderful guest. She is going to inform us about all things osteoporosis, bone health, and the clinical trials, which we patients need to know about so that we know what the latest information is and what's going to become available to us in the coming years regarding treatment. So anyway, I'm going to welcome here Dr. Tania Kamphaus. She serves in the dual role of leading the FNIH Foundations of the National Institutes of Health patient engagement efforts, providing oversight to several of the programs within FNIH's metabolic disorders, women's health, and inflammation and immunity portfolios. In her role as FNIH's patient engagement lead, she is responsible for establishing the best practices for engaging patient voices, very important there, for meaningful end-to-end patient involvement in FNIH programs. Within science partnerships, she is also responsible for developing multi-stakeholder public-private partnerships that include stakeholders from the NIH, the FDA, nonprofits, and life science companies. Dr. Kamphaus oversees 3 target validation programs within Accelerating Medicine Partnerships, the AMP, programs in areas of common metabolic diseases, heart failure, and immune and autoimmune diseases. A lot of you are going to be interested in that. She also oversees projects including biomarker qualification efforts in liver diseases, preeclampsia, osteoporosis, and emerging programs in reproductive health. Dr. Kamphaus was a key contributor to the recent validation of bone mineral density by the FDA, and that's going to be very important for a lot of you with osteoporosis, and we're going to hear more about that from Dr. Kamphaus here shortly. And she is also trained in molecular genetics and cell biology, and she's skilled in strategic planning and collaborative program development across basic, translational, and patient-centric clinical research. Dr. Kamphaus has conducted her postdoctoral fellowship at Columbia University, and she also has a PhD in molecular genetics from Ohio State University. Go Ohio. So anyway, thank you so much. Tania, I'm so excited to have you here today with me.
It's my pleasure, Jackie. Thank you so much for inviting me.
It's been great. It's been great going to events with you and speaking at the conferences. So I think that what you have to say is going to be very valuable to our listeners and our audience today. I wanted to get right into it and have you tell us a little bit about your background in science and research and what brought you to the FNIH.
So most of my career I've spent in either academia or nonprofit, and I've been fairly mission driven. I believe in patient centricity in all of the work that I have done and continue to do, and be great privilege to lead that effort at the Foundation for NIH, along with the science programs that I'm also part of. The Foundation for NIH, a lot of people don't know about us. We are a nonprofit, and we support the mission of NIH by building partnerships between NIH institutes, FDA, and other government entities, and the private sector, which could be large pharma, small biotechs, but just as importantly, foundations, patient advocacy groups, and patients like you. And that's how we met, right? So we like to build these partnerships to really fully understand how our resources, know-how, our dollars, our regulatory decisions can all align so we get the best results, fastest, and the best treatments to people. So that's really the overarching goal of all of the work that we do at the foundation.
And that's what's so exciting. I mean, when I met all of you last year and I heard about, how much you're supportive of the patient advocacy and the patient voice and the public-private partnerships, it was really exciting to hear that. And, to me, it just seemed like, wow, this is a really unique enterprise going on here. How serious, we want to, since it is Bone Health and Osteoporosis Month, I wanted to start with that topic, of course. And I think one of the points I want to get through to our audience is how serious is osteoporosis in the U.S. and how many people are affected? What is it costing in terms of productivity and cost to hospitals and, our healthcare system as a whole?
So, Jackie, as you know well, and so many of us do, but sadly, it's not as obvious to a lot of people. Osteoporosis is a very common, a very serious, and a chronic problem. So if you are over 50, your likelihood as a female of having a fracture due to osteoporosis, right? Not having osteoporosis, but having a fracture as a result of osteoporosis is 1 in every 3 women will experience that. That's a lot.
Yeah.
It's not just, it's definitely much more prevalent in women, but men also get osteoporosis, and 1 in 5 men will also experience a fracture as a result of osteoporosis. Now, we all know that at a certain age, if you have a fracture, recovery when we are older is much longer, and fractures are very hard to recover from. And the risk of long hospital stays, the burden it is on families and our hospital system and our public health resources is enormous. The mortality risk, sadly, if you suffer a hip fracture, is also alarmingly high within 2 years of suffering that fracture. So in general, it's common, it's very bad, and we don't know it because it sneaks up on us, as you know, Jackie, right? And so how would you find out that you have osteoporosis? Well, there's an easy scan, right? It's called a DEXA scan. And most of us would be willing to do it, except we don't all know that we are supposed to do it. I've spoken to a lot of patients in sort of preparation for our bone mineral density qualification, where many people were like, nobody told us to get a DEXA scan until I was 65, or a friend told me, or and that's a problem, because once your bones start to hollow out, osteoporosis, it's very hard to build it back, and it can happen very fast. Jack, I hope you will tell your story where you can get diagnosed with a less severe condition called osteopenia, and you might think you have some time to figure it out, but it can go real fast. And so really good counseling from your physicians, first of all, having good physicians, good education on bone health, what you should be doing to develop your bone health as in your 30s and 40s, so you don't have to deal with osteoporosis later on in life. All of these things are critical. This education is really, really, really important. But equally important are all the people in their 50s and 60s and 70s and 80s who have osteoporosis, are living with it, and need treatment options that work for them. Right. And that's the space in which the FNIH and several of the pharmaceutical companies who work in this space for drug development, as well as NIH and FDA, try to come up with a solution where we could get better treatments to patients faster. And that's what our SABRE project was about.
Yes, yes, and for our audience purposes too, when Tanya talks about this is a big problem and that fractures can happen easily, I have 5 spinal fractures in my thoracic region. That thoracic region is like the region right behind your lungs. And so I had 5 compression fractures, and the way I got the first one, I was making the bed. If you are having a fracture in your spine, a compression, they'll call it a compression fracture just by making the bed or sneezing or coughing, that's a red flag, okay, that you definitely need to go get that checked out.
Absolutely.
Absolutely right. And I also broke my wrist just by falling like about 2 feet. I was standing up and I fell when my dog swung around really fast and kind of hit me with his back end, and I went over and I fractured this left wrist. And it was very painful, let me tell you. But that was because of the osteoporosis. And I avoided treatment for 8 years. My doctor did tell me to go get a DEXA 10 years ago. He did tell me he thought, because I had chronic conditions, I was taking prednisone. He was concerned. He says, go get a DEXA. And I did, and it showed osteopenia. And as Tanya said, well, you might think you have time, so I did. And I really didn't. And my bones continued to worsen every year. I read some horror stories online. I fell down that rabbit hole. And not saying that women don't experience side effects or anything from these, but as a journalist, I should know this too. More often, people are going to make it more known when something doesn't work for them. And that's understandable. I think it's human nature. But if women are taking, say, osteoporosis treatments and having a good response from it, they're out living their life. They're not on the internet talking about how great it was. So that's also part of the reason I'm here, because finally I did get on a bone building medication that sent my scores in the other direction. So my bones are now improved. My osteoporosis is not cured. It will never be cured, but my bones are stronger now because I went on the medication. So, and when we're talking about this SABRE project, that's going to really open up a plethora of doors for more options for treatment.
Absolutely.
So I'm sorry for kind of taking the spotlight
No,
there.
I actually wanted to flag a couple of things for your listeners on what you
Yes.
said. One is that Jackie has a really excellent medical team. There are people who are telling her to go and do preventative care and treatment, which majority of the people don't have, right? We end up going to a hospital when there is an emergency, and we often don't get the knowledge and the importance and the trust with our physician, where we like, all right, the doctor is telling us we should get this done, we should get this done. So that's one, like that's a benefit, right, that most of the people don't have. And then the second thing that I want to flag is we don't really want to go and take medicines which even have the slightest risk if the urgency is not clear. If you don't feel if you don't feel terrible, right, until you break a bone, you're not gonna wanna take a medicine. So I just wanna let people just think about it. It's better to take those medicines early on if your doctor prescribes it, so that you can reverse the outcome rather than suffer the outcome first. I tell you, fractured, if anybody has been through it, is very painful, right? Just thinking about it is kind of cringy. So just want to flag those two from what you said, Jackie.
Oh, absolutely. And I tell people too, you only have one spine, especially. They don't do spine transplants. So if you leave it go, it can be a very painful existence, which is what I deal with now. So, so that brings us to SABRE. And what is it, and how did this project come about?
So let me maybe give you a little bit of the background of what was going on in, say, 2012, 2013, just about 10 to 15 years ago. There were medicines that were effectively treating osteoporosis. But we had a couple of things on the market. And while some people were on those medicines, there were very rarely they have side effects, but to the point you sort of illustrated, Jackie, when you read about it, you kind of don't, you're like, maybe I don't need this in my life. I have other things going on, you know? Um, and also it's a medicine that you have to be on for a long period of time. So whether it suits you or it depends on people, right? So having one or two types of medicines that may have some side effect and you have to be on for a long period of time was difficult. So while there were meds available, we were starting to see skyrocketing in the number of fractures due to osteoporosis.
Right.
And so in about 2014 or so, FNIH, the Foundation for NIH, which builds these types of partnerships, brought together NIH as well as several of the companies that had either completed or stalled or closed clinical, shelved clinical trials for agents or drugs that might treat osteoporosis. So they had data on patients. And we also had some brilliant scientists, Dr. Dennis Black at UCSF and Dr. Mary Buckstein, who you know well, at Harvard, who were very engaged in the field, had written lots of opinion pieces at this point. We brought this consortium together and we asked a very simple question, which was, we know that when you have a fracture, your bone density is low, right? Because osteoporosis is would be low bone density. And so could you just measure the bone density, right, through a DEXA scan? And then ask the question, if you give a medicine to somebody and their bone density goes up by a certain amount in a certain length of time, is that sufficient for us to say that the drug is working? Instead of, which was the norm at that point, wait to see if somebody would get a fracture, right, in that clinical trial. Now, why is that important, right? Well, it's important because fractures take a long time to accumulate. So it becomes a math problem that we need to have enough people in the clinical trial that when you have the control arm, which is the standard of care for osteoporosis, and your test arm, you have to follow all those people for a very long time to see if in one arm there are more fractures versus another. And this was an extremely expensive problem for most pharmaceutical companies. You're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars for every single treatment to see if the treatment works or not. And 5 years and then more follow-up on top of that. And thousands of patients, right? So it was starting to become a very complicated problem. As a result, there weren't a lot of, even though there were interesting medicines to try, there were not too many takers for that, right? Nobody was launching a big clinical trial. Some were, but it was very rare. So by shifting the study design, so you just measure the bone mineral density, right, over a 2-year period, you could reduce the amount of time and the number of people because your math problem simplifies. And that means that you can test medicines faster and about 10 times cheaper with 10 times fewer people in the mix. So you can see that it makes the system pretty flexible, and a lot of new treatments can be tested, and in 2 years' time, you know what's available to you for your specific biology and whether it's going to be a good drug for you or not.
Absolutely. And that's why I was so excited when I heard about the project, because I thought, wow, if we had more choices of drugs that could be, more tailored to, whatever, if we had sensitivities to this one, well, we could try this other one,
Right.
and just having more choices and waiting for that fracture could take a long time. Plus the fractures are painful. So who
Right.
wants to do that?
Who wants to wait for a fracture? Who wants
Right,
to hope for a fracture so the clinical trial can come to an end? It's a little ethical problem too. So yeah.
Absolutely. And the DEXA we keep talking about, it's such an easy test. It's one of the easiest procedures I ever go through. You just show up. It takes about 15 minutes. You lie on a table. They make you comfortable. They put your legs up. And then this little scanner arm just go, I did it on my Instagram. I showed how it worked and everything when I went for my last one at Johns Hopkins a few months ago. And it just goes, the scanner arm itself doesn't even touch you. It just passes over your body, passes a couple of passes, and then you're done. And you get up and you get dressed and you go about your day. So, I mean, it's one of the simplest, right? It's just one of the
I
simplest
recently got a
tests.
DEXA as well, and I want to tell people, as somebody who can get a little claustrophobic in an MRI machine, it's nowhere close to your body. You don't feel like you are stuck in a place. It happens pretty quickly. And yeah, you're in and out. It's so simple, but it is so helpful for your, just health maintenance, knowing that you may need a medicine, and also knowing that medicines are available to you should you need anything. So that, I think, is really, really important message.
Exactly. And because I was having mine annually at one point because my bones were so bad, when I went on the medication, the very next year we saw improvement, and the year after that we saw improvement. And that's why the SABRE project made sense to me, because when I thought, well, they're going to use DEXA to evaluate bone mineral density, I thought, yeah, you can see improvement even just after a year, because it happened to me.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I'm so happy for you, Jackie. That's
Yeah.
that's real science in clinical practice. You can
Yes.
actually see and believe the evidence that you see. It's so fantastic.
How did this lead to the qualification from the FDA?
So just to explain some of these sort of, terms can get a little bit jargony, right? So let me
Yes.
go through just a couple of steps. FDA has a program called the Biomarker Qualification Program. And what they do is they sort of kind of qualify or approve a biomarker. In this case, the biomarker is bone mineral density as measured by DEXA. To say that, yes, if you see this much change in this measurement in this amount of time, it's very specific. Those sort of specs are very specific, and FDA takes a lot of time to make sure that they are careful about this. Then you can replace fracture with this, right? And that's called a surrogate qualification. So we have a surrogate to fracture, which is just the density of your bones. And this was the first surrogate to be qualified by the FDA under the 21st Century Cures Act. It was a big deal because a lot of clinical trials, a lot of people running clinical trials would love to have quicker endpoints. Endpoint in a clinical trial is the point at which you make a decision whether it's working or not. They would like to have not go 5-10 years into the trial, because lots of bad things can happen and patients are waiting for medicines. So that just to have a process and a first in surrogate endpoint is really beneficial for osteoporosis drug development companies, because now they can start, and a lot of small companies have started clinical trials in osteoporosis again as a result of this, but also for other disease areas. I'm like you said in my introduction, I work on liver diseases as well. We are starting to think about what kind of evidence do we need to pull together to get a surrogate in liver disease, and it's heavily informed by the feedback we have had from the FDA for osteoporosis. So it's really sort of a trailblazing activity, because it changes how conceptually we think about a clinical trial without compromising risk to patients.
Right. Right. And I think that's so important. And I think that, we as patients can be reassured by this about, how the trials are being conducted and how they're getting results and everything. So, it can really feel like for us patients that we get in the weeds with all this information. But I think it's really important. Like when I sat down with my endocrinologist, he did explain to me how the clinical trials went on the medication I was about to take. And he explained the risks fully. And, I think I just appreciated the transparency so that I could have a discussion with my doctor. But like you said, look, guys, I am very, very lucky, because I have a team of doctors like no other. They are the best. And I'm 63, and I've I've been through this for a long time, so, but I have found some of the best doctors, I think, on the planet. I'm very grateful for them and for them to be willing to have those conversations with me.
Absolutely, absolutely. This reminds me, Jackie, last couple of weeks back, we recorded a discussion on what it means to do a clinical trial.
Yes.
And it's for patients just so they can understand what it actually means, because the word clinical trial, we've been saying it so long, it's become neutral, but the word trial is a little intimidating for a lot of people too, right? And so we've tried to put together something where in a discussion we are sharing what are the steps that one needs to go through if you want to participate in one, and what do all these sort of three-letter words mean? There's so much jargon everywhere, and it can be quite intimidating. You're a professional at this point with all of your conversations, but I remember, I'm sure when you were first entering the system, it was a little difficult. So we are trying to do
Lost.
that. So that people have the same baseline going into a conversation and they can feel confident to ask some questions.
Absolutely. And do you have a link for that?
It's not even posted yet. We just recorded. I just remembered, I just recalled that I should probably share that with you.
Yes.
But I will certainly share it, and feel free to share it with everybody. It'll be publicly available.
Yes, I think that those kind of patient education materials are so important. So as we had talked about, now that SABR has been qualified by the FDA, and it's going to open up opportunities for smaller biotech firms to, get on board and get on track with developing these osteoporosis treatments. Because, really compared like now to back then, as you mentioned, there wasn't much going on in the osteoporosis treatment space about 12 years ago or so. Everything had seemingly stalled. We had, certain drugs were out there, but that was it. That was all that was available. Why do we know why it stalled, or why was it just kind of, other than the lengthy trials and the cost?
The speculation, I can speculate a little bit, but one is the cost was extremely high, right? Because you are multiplying by number of patients a number of years, and that was just compounding. And so most companies had to make a decision: should we put money in another osteoporosis drug, or should we put money in, say, a cancer treatment, right? These are all real decisions that people have to make. And so when something becomes bloated, right, a clinical trial becomes so massive, it loses its kind of, what is the likelihood that it's even going to be successful, right? And
Exactly.
so let's try on a few different things without the cost accrual. And so that's, I think, one of the challenges that was there. The second thing was that there were existing medicines, right? So because there were existing medicines, when you do a clinical trial, your control arm is the standard of care. If somebody needs a medicine and a medicine is available, you're not going to give them a sugar pill. You're going to give them the existing medicine. And then the trial medicine is in the second arm, right? And because the medicine actually worked if people used it, the control arm was not accruing as many fractures either.
Yes.
So your trial is getting longer and longer and longer because you have to go so far out.
Right.
And so between those two things, I think most companies realized that the osteoporosis drug development space the things were getting gummed up a little bit. And
Right.
what was really needed to move forward was an innovation in how we did clinical trials. How could we do it with fewer people and faster without compromising on risk to patients? And so that's the value of what the SABR study brought together. Now, I also want to share with you that all the companies that were participating in the study donated all of their clinical trials data, which are, and
that
each
never
one is hundreds of
happens.
millions of dollars, right? It happens. We do a lot of programs like that. But it is, so if you think about it, it required everybody's goodwill and desire to help patients that helped us get to this point. No one company won from this, right? We changed the way trials are done so everybody could come play in the field. And I find that to be just such a joyous thing, that
Yes.
we all contributed so that the next round of medicines could come to the market.
And I think that shows the commitment to the bottom line, which is patient care.
Absolutely.
I know a lot of us sometimes we don't feel that way, but it is truly, I have spoken to so many physicians and researchers at these conferences I go to. And I try to get the message out there about how much all of you really do care about the patient. That's really, the patient is the number one, and it's, the end goal, the end game, whatever you want to call it. But, and I was trying to draw that parallel as to, the time where studies and innovations had stalled. And now the innovation of the SABRE project is just going to, I feel like it's going to revolutionize osteoporosis
There are
treatment.
already, and also in a few different ways, right? The companies that were involved in in osteoporosis research were the larger pharma, just because of the size of the clinical trials. We are looking at Eli Lilly and Merck and Pfizer, big companies. And since we got this sort of advisory from the FDA, we have small biotechs jumping into the fray, right, with new medicines that we have no idea how well they might work, right? But it's so useful to have a few different options, and that for smaller companies, the small fish to come and be as competitive as the larger companies, which I find is just it's just nice to just have so many different options and scientific creativity support the drug development in this space.
Yes, definitely. And you had mentioned that you had just done that recording to help patients learn about clinical trials and what that all involves. Because that was one of my questions also was, how patients can learn more about clinical trials and recruitment. Because, sometimes I've gone on that, what is it, clinicaltrials.gov or something. It's so overwhelming, but there's a lot of studies there. But it can, when you do it, just as a patient, and I feel overwhelmed. I can't imagine somebody trying to do it, like just getting into this. And it seems like you get all these results. What is the best way or the easiest way? Like, do our physicians know about them, or where do we start?
We can definitely improve that system a little bit. All clinical trials, whether they're being done by NIH or an academic center or a company, have to be registered at clinicaltrials.gov. It's a legal requirement. What you can find there, and I will agree with you, it's not easy to navigate that website. And I know a lot of people who are working on AI tools. So you can ask a question and get a response instead of having to scroll through like a ton of words that you may or may not fully grasp, right, what's going on. But the information is all there, which is, what type of medicine is this? Who's sponsoring the trial? Which centers is it being run at? Which means that where can you go to participate in it? You can also select on that website by your location. So let's say you live close to Philly. You can see all the trials that are being carried out at UPenn or Drexel or other sort of university hospitals around there, or even some private large clinics do clinical trials as well. So you can find by location, and you can certainly find by if you're more sophisticated in your search and you know what type of drug you're looking for within the same disease area, you can find that way as well. The second thing you should check for are the inclusion and exclusion criteria. What will make you eligible for the trial? And sometimes what medicines you've been on in the past can exclude you from the clinical trial. So those are the things to look at, but definitely look at the location and look at the inclusion and exclusion criteria. The third thing you want to look at is the protocol. Are you going to need to go every month and get 3 MRIs done? Well, that's prohibitive for folks, right? And so just see the burden of the study, right? And if it's possible for you to do that. And I'll only say, as a scientist and as somebody who's been reviewing data on the other end, it's really difficult you basically lose the data if the participant drops out of the study midway or they can't do it. If that data holds, then that data becomes difficult to read.
Right.
And so if you commit to it, definitely commit to the duration, do the follow-up surveys. At this point, most sites make it very easy with the questionnaire and everything else. It becomes pretty straightforward. It's just finding those clinical trials. And like I said, I agree with you. The ct.gov website, could use some help. And I know multiple people working on different types of apps to make that so. So in the world, in the sort of era of AI, I don't think it's going to be too far behind where we'll have some easy ways to access it.
I mean, clinicaltrials.gov, it's a great site. It has
a lot of
absolutely
information.
everything on it. But if you're someone, not like me, maybe someone who is just getting into this, and you go to that website and you're looking for a trial, and this long list is going to be generated.
It's overwhelming.
You're going to
I would also
blown
say,
away.
if you've reached the point where you have a list of 6 or 7 trials and you're like, gee, I don't know which one I can't even read these things. Like I've hit a saturation point. A really good resource is a nonprofit that works in that disease area. So they tend to know which clinic, and they have much more knowledge of the clinical trials, and they understand patient burden. So some of them have hotlines or sort of advocacy arms. Or you can send an email to somebody at a nonprofit. At FNIH, we receive tons of emails from people asking us questions. And it's, we are much more general. We serve lots of different disease spaces, so we don't have experts on a particular disease. But I would highly recommend you go to, just if you have osteoporosis, just search osteoporosis foundations, patients, and you will find Bone Health and Osteoporosis Foundation.
That was how I found them.
and then you can go there and you can see if you can find somebody, or just send an email to their mailbox. Hey, I need some help navigating which clinical trial I would like to participate in. And more often than not, you will get a response and somebody will walk you through it. So that's always one. The second is, if you have osteoporosis doc, you can print this out and take it to them and say, hey, I want to participate in a trial. Which one do you think is a good one for me? But most folks don't have specialists. They're working with general physicians. So
Yes.
I often think that a foundation that works specifically in that disease is going to be a little bit more helpful than a general doctor.
Absolutely. And, my next question to you was going to be about discussing, the need, how patients can discuss their need for DEXA with their physicians, and, what can help them better understand the results, because the DEXA results are not easy to read either.
No.
But let's just mention also here, who should be concerned enough to ask their doctor, hey, do I need a DEXA?
If you are a woman over the age of 55, you should try to get a DEXA, however you can. There is some data that white women tend to have a slightly higher risk than non-white women, but the risk for women in general is much higher than the risk for men. So if you hit that threshold of age, if you've been on long-term steroid, like you said, on prednisone for a long time, you can have that for any number of autoimmune diseases. Sometimes docs just put you, on a steroid for a long period of time for maintenance. You can have issues with bone loss. So if you've had some serious conditions that you have dealt with in your past, if you have been through a lot of chemo, there are many conditions which will cause some loss of bone strength. So if you're between 50 and 55, start asking the question about getting a DEXA scan for your bone. Now, remember, you can get a DEXA for both bone, and you can get a DEXA for body composition, which is fat and muscle and things like that. They both use the same kind of machine. But the DEXA for bone density is a well-established thing. Most hospitals and many doctors' offices have a DEXA machine. You can
Yes.
Google and find one near you.
Right.
And I'm told, though I'm not sure, that even if you have to pay out of pocket, a DEXA scan is not is maybe a couple of $100s. It's not
Right.
prohibitively expensive, but I'm not 100% sure about that. Definitely check that as well.
It
It should
doesn't
be
cost
covered
like, yeah, as much as
thousands
an
of dollars. Yeah.
MRI.
Correct.
Right.
Yes. No, I don't think so. It's
Okay.
much cheaper because it's a simpler instrument. It is read by a radiologist, right? So a doctor will read your scan and give you a T-score, which is your score for whether you're strong, you have osteopenia, or you have osteoporosis. And so that you get a score, and that's how you know how much intervention you need with medicines.
And your doctor will tell you, like,
Yes,
my endocrinologist will explain my results because I'll look at them and
absolutely.
go, what does this mean?
Yeah, yeah. You have this like a blue, green, yellow, red, the T
Yes.
score thing, and so you
They
just
look
kind of
like a bunch of
know.
charts and
Right,
graphs and
right.
oh my goodness.
Once somebody reads your bone scan and translates that into a T score, and that's a radiologist, right? That's not your general physician. Once that happens, almost all physicians will be able to read. You'll be able to read, that and know where you are and what you need to do. But you do need a radiologist to read that the first
Yes.
report. Or maybe I don't know if these days machines automatically do it as well. I'm not entirely sure about that, but
Right.
that's the way to do it.
And I tell people too that I think the reason we kind of forget about our bones is because you can't see your bones.
That's right.
You can't see them,
You
like
can't
you can
feel
feel
them.
skin.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and other things that, like, my brother was 6'4". He was undergoing cancer treatment for a long period of time, like 5 years. And he developed osteoporosis. So he also had to go on a treatment plan for his osteoporosis. I mean, this is a guy, big, tall guy,
Yeah.
muscular and lean and everything. I mean, you look at him, when you look at somebody, you can't tell if they
No.
have osteoporosis unless you let your spine get too many of those compression fractures. Then we have, and I
You
have it
laugh
too,
because
a
there's nothing
mild,
else to do, but it
yeah,
is
I have the
horrible.
mild
Yeah.
kyphosis. Yeah. Essentially, my vertebra have gone, okay, we can't do this anymore. They can't hold me quite, big and tall. So they start to lean forward. And when I was a child, I used to feel like that was the norm for when you got older. Many
Yeah.
of us believed that when you
Absolutely.
got older, that's just what happens to your bones. But I have come to learn that does not have to happen. And osteoporosis is preventable or can be sort of pushed out a little further where maybe you won't develop it until you're 85 or 90 if you know how to take care of your bones to begin with.
Absolutely. It's such a preventable condition. It requires, like everything else, exercise, which none of us like, but is probably a good thing early in life. And what you eat, how you treat your body, but also when you get a certain age, to make sure we now have ways to measure your bone health. For centuries we didn't have that, right? Now we have an easy way that you can actually look at your bones and see how they are doing. And you can do it once a year if you are at risk, or once every 5 years, right, if your bones look fine. But once you know what you cannot see, it's extremely empowering because now you can take care of things before damage happens. And I think that that's how we should be looking at the value of these types of scans.
Exactly. And when patients, if they know they're at risk, then they, like, your risks. And you can do this by looking at some of the nonprofit bone health and osteoporosis foundation websites. They do have very detailed lists on them, like, have you taken this medication? Do you have this disorder or this disease? Are you a transplant patient? Are you a cancer patient? And then that can give you an idea, right, about I should go talk to my doctor and ask them about DEXA. And even like a general practitioner is probably where most people are going to start that conversation,
Of course.
correct?
Of course. I
Yes.
think most of us, hopefully, get an annual exam once a year at a general practitioner. And but we have to advocate for ourselves. We have to advocate to get a scan and have that be part of our record, and make sure that we are following up as needed. And exactly like you said, Jackie, because we cannot see our bones, we don't think about it. Once you start squinting while you have to read something, you will get reading glasses, right? Because you can see the impact that's coming. But we have no way of knowing what's happening to our bones until we fracture, and nobody needs that. Trust me, nobody wants. And it is, 1 in 3 women, right? It's not uncommon. It's coming. So just make sure when you go to your doctor, ask about your bone health, how you can, first of all, how can I make sure what can I do to help my bone health? And they'll tell you that. And also, can I get, please, a DEXA scan so I know what my baseline is, so I can make sure that I'm improving.
And there are a variety of different exercises. I mean, I belong to our local YMCA because that's most cost
Jackie,
effective
you
for
just
me.
you exercise way more than I do,
Yeah.
and it's just phenomenal. How much you exercise in the water, which is absolutely wonderful
Oh,
for
yes.
strengthening bones and muscles without causing, tears and breaks. So, water-based aerobics are excellent for this. Yeah, and a lot of
Oh,
a lot
yes.
of gyms provide that kind of thing. So yeah, and then you
And
educate
walking, I
everybody in
know
the locker
we're,
room afterwards. So there's that.
oh, I do. I do. I'm on it. When I hear somebody talk about, oh, I broke my arm a few years ago, and I'm like, did you have a DEXA? They just hear
Time,
this
that's really how,
voice.
the word has to be like, patient to
Yeah.
patient or person to person is how we really listen. So
Right.
I'm glad you're
Yeah.
doing that.
Definitely. And you don't even have to join a YMCA or any fitness center. I mean, walking, which we're promoting a lot this month, just simple walking. You don't have to go out on some long hike. Consistency, I think, is what's key, right? I mean,
Absolutely.
you could go out on a 1 mile walk, which is about 2,000 steps
Right?
ish or
Hmm.
so. Take your time, but you can go out on a walk for 1 mile a day. I know we did
It's
that promotion last year with the Bone Health and Osteoporosis Foundation, was walk a mile a day.
It's wonderful. And you know what? If you can pair that 1 mile walk, which could be 20 minutes or 22 minutes, right after you eat a meal, you're also helping any future diabetes or those things. So do that. Take
It
a
benefits a
walk.
lot.
It benefits everything. After breakfast, after lunch, after dinner, pick one, but take a 20-minute walk, and you will see you'll be doing a really, really good thing for your body.
So if you're just getting started in all this, or if you have questions about your bone health, start with your general practitioner. And they know your health the best. They have all your medical information, and ask them that question. Could I be at risk for osteoporosis or osteopenia? And they'll look at it and they'll look at your chart and they'll tell you yes or no. And if you are, they'll probably write that prescription like mine did and send you off for the DEXA. Many DEXAs, they're close by. I mean, I live in Central Maryland. We have radiology clinics. I could just throw a rock and hit
It's
one.
it's actually surprisingly, easily available. But I
Very.
didn't live so far from you, Jackie, and I'm not sure how it is in some parts of America.
Yes.
But they're not as rare as you would think. They seem to be around. Yeah.
Yes. Yes. So, even in the more rural areas, you may have to go a little further to find one, but for the most part, radiology clinics are plentiful here
They
in
are.
the US. And so now, what do you foresee for the future of osteoporosis treatment and reducing fracture risks?
I'm really excited about this, right? Because I am, at the end of the day, a scientist, and I care a lot about people getting better. So in my ideal world, and I think that's sort of where we are going here, is we will start to see more and more treatment options come to the market for osteoporosis in the next 2 to 5 years. What that means is, when you sort of combine that with the advocacy and education work that you guys are doing, people will be asking for treatment options, and there will be 5 things to choose from, which I think is really important. And then you can find the one that works best for your body. Like Jackie did, you get on a medicine, you see if your bone health is improving, and you have minimal or no side effects, right? That's the best combination. And you kind of want to try a couple of things before you get there. And so my hope is that we will have options, and we'll have empowerment and education, so we can combine those things, go to a doctor, get a diagnosis, and if we have a diagnosis, then we have a few medicines to try and find the one that best fits our needs. So you don't have to be like hunching in your old age. You can have perfect bone health in your 80s and 90s, and then do a lot of things and live a very, very good quality of life. My other hope is that it opens the door for so many other diseases that have the same problem with clinical trial design. And if we can find a way to replicate the success of SABR for other disease areas, I think that we might be able to see the same type of growth and acceleration in those spaces, and I'm excited about that too.
I'm very excited too. You are excited as a researcher. I'm excited as a patient. We're all excited here.
We're all excited.
Yeah. Yes. Is there anything you would like to leave our audience with today?
So like I think we've kind of beaten this over the head a little bit. Make sure you speak to your doctor about your bone health. Just because you can't see your bones doesn't mean they don't exist. They're definitely doing all the work to keep you standing and working and stuff. And, if you need resources to talk about, there are lots of advocacy groups, but there are also people like Jackie who are in the community who are there to answer your questions, be your peers, and help you through your journey. Use the resources in the field. You're not alone, but it's good to understand what's going on. And most of us like to not look at the problem straight in the face, but sometimes that's what you got to do. And then you find out that there's in fact so much that can be done about it, and people who are going to support you through any journey. So I would just wish that all of us would do that, and take good care of our bones. And, if you're interested in all the different types of partnerships we do at the foundation, which span the areas of neurological diseases like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's and ALS, schizophrenia, or cancers, all different kinds of cancers. We work on lots of metabolic diseases like obesity. We work on lots of autoimmune diseases. We do a lot of this kind of work to help science move forward better and faster with the least risk to patients. So if you want to understand something else that's going on, you can go to our website and take a look, and certainly reach out to folks who are running those programs to get a better understanding of what's happening.
Most definitely. I want to really thank you for being here with me today and talking with me about this very important topic, like the rest of our health, bone health. And like all health issues, you can't ignore your bones because they'll remind you that they're there. And mine was a simple pop in my back, pulling up the comforter on the bed. I ignored it. It reminded me, said, we are here. So I want to thank you and the FNIH for everything that you're doing. And of course, our wonderful researchers, Dr. Buxane and Dr. Black, and just everybody who was involved with the SABR project. From an osteoporosis patient here, I'm very grateful, and I'm grateful for your time here today.
And I'm grateful for all the work that you have done, Jackie. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much, and I want to thank our audience. I want to leave you all with this reminder as well. Remember, this is not medical information. It is for information purposes only. If you have a health issue, if you think you have sepsis, Call your doctor, dial 911, get to the nearest ER. That is the place you need to be. Anyway, so again, thank you, audience. Thank you, everybody, for listening in today and for watching us. And I can't wait to see you on the next episode of Laughter Through Tears. And thank you again.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.